Nashville, Tennessee, we bring you Ask WWCR, a bi-weekly program that discusses the operation of WWCR and various topics of interest to all shortwave listeners. And now, here's the current edition of Ask WWCR.
Welcome to Ask WWCR, program number 546, which is intended for broadcast March the 26th through April 9th, 2021. I'm Brady Murray, and I'm joined, as always, by Dr. Jerry Plummer, once again, though, by phone. Right, Doc?
That's it. But, you know, the day's coming where we won't have to speak telephonically. I believe that day's coming sometime pretty soon.
I think so. I think that you're close to being ready to do any of the things that you used to do, right?
Yeah, right. I've got the vaccination, and I think yours is coming up in about a week, 10 days with luck.
Sure. We have probably folks who listen to this program that say, I wouldn't take the vaccination, and we're not here to compel anybody to do it, but I think we both agreed. Let's get back on with some degree of normalcy, right?
It's whatever somebody decides. You and I decide if we want to take it. You know, given that, I'm all happy because that, at least in my mind, will be somewhat protected, right?
Absolutely.
That's good news.
Doc, let's start with a couple of new broadcasters.
Yeah, didn't you say you had some new broadcasters?
We do, and they're going to start during the time that this program will run. So let's go ahead. We're going to be a little ahead on both. But let's start with Dr. Joe Allen. The program is Dr. Allen Presents. And this is going to be Monday, 2:30 Central, Thursday, 11:45 Central, and Friday, 9:15 p.m. Central, all on transmitter 1. So that's going to cover, 15.825 and then 32.15.
Right, yeah, that's two good frequencies there.
So look for that to begin on April the 5th. We're going to have 3 airings per week. It's a 15-minute broadcast called Dr. Allen Presents, and I strongly suspect that on the new program guide released on the 1st of April, that those details will be there.
That's good. That's real good. Where is he from? Do you know?
He is in Florida.
Florida, okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. And you got him 2 good frequencies, too.
We do, definitely. Also, Doc, I want to mention that we'll have an expansion. Saturdays, transmitter 2, we have Think Red Ink. It's called The Words of Jesus, rather. Words of Jesus with Don Harris. And I think you may be familiar with that program. Don Harris was with us maybe 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
About a year ago came back on the air with us on 93.50 on Saturdays. He's going to expand. We talked about the broadcast. It's a year old. Are we going to continue with that? And he said, absolutely, and I'd like to actually expand. And so the expansion is going to be Saturdays at 7:30 p.m. Central, which I believe, Doc, help me, is this 0030 UT?
Yeah.
Is that how you'd say that?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you're right. You're right on the money.
And the frequency is 4840.
Yeah, I remember he was on maybe 12 or 15 years ago, and then I remember last year you told me that he was making a comeback, and that's good. Now he's expanding.
It's real good, and expanding is always great. And I wanted to mention this about Don Harris. I've spoken with him many times. This last time when he and I talked about expanding and about 4840, he said that he, a few years ago, was in Africa and that he got a shortwave radio and tuned up WWCR. And that just did it for him. You know, we tell people this works. We get response. We talk about response. But it was his personal experience that said this really does work.
Oh, yeah, it does. I know a long time ago, the first those HFCCs I went to was in Tunis, and I brought a shortwave radio. And I believe that we could, get picked up. But when I first heard us over there for the first time, I thought, you know what? This is truly real. This stuff does work.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Makes a big difference to know, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. And, and that way you can kind of talk to somebody straight up and look them in the eye over the phone, if you will, and say, yeah, it will reach. And that's true. You've heard it reach. I know when you was in Tunis, you were tuning up stuff and hearing it reach.
Yes, every frequency. Kept a spreadsheet and kept a very light sleeping schedule to test all those frequencies.
But I know the first day that I heard it, I think 2007, I thought, you know what, this really is true. I always believed it was true. Now I know it's true.
So, Doc, another expansion that we have, shortwave listeners know the program WWCR International.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to get into that just a little bit. We expanded that program to WITA Knoxville, and that's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. And that's also, we have a stream for WITA 1490, and it's also available on TuneIn. And I got a response from the host of VORW after the first program, and he says the new airing on WITA already seems to be doing nicely. I got an email from a listener in the Knoxville area who had struggled with getting any of my broadcasts due to RF interference, and was able to hear clearly on 1490 AM. And so he actually sent that response. It's a gentleman named Greg in Knoxville, and that's exactly what he's saying. Hey, this is great. I hear it. It's clear. And then what's interesting to me about that, Doc, is I looked through other responses that he sent, and one was a gentleman, Jarrett, in Kingsport, Tennessee, who always listens on shortwave.
Wow.
So for folks not familiar with the Knoxville area, Kingsport is not far away.
No, it's not.
It's too far for our station in Knoxville to reach.
Mm-hmm.
So that gentleman's picking up WWCR 6115 to listen to VORW.
That's good.
And he's got several, as he always does, several really good reports. Just going through the list here, you're in Ontario, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, Florida, again, Pennsylvania, Delaware. He does very well overseas. And these are folks talking about this is the first time that I've listened, talking about the request that they're asking for him to play.
Right.
It's just good
Right.
stuff.
Yeah,
and another one worth
a very
mentioning.
good job of reporting, people that report to him. And again, it's like we were saying, that's truth. That's people actually listening there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just making up something and putting it on a sheet of paper. That's verified by a third party, not me, not you, but him. They're coming to him with these notes. So it definitely gets out, no doubt.
But it tells you quite a bit, Doc. I mentioned that VORW has been on WNQM Nashville at 2 a.m. Central on Saturday mornings, right?
Right.
And here's a gentleman writing in, says I'm a big fan, listen on 1300 every weekend, 2 a.m., right?
2 in the morning.
So, and some folks have said that they listened on TuneIn. Maybe they're on the West Coast, and it's more like midnight. But the fact is, whether you're listening on TuneIn, on stream, like so many who report listening on 6115, 2200 UT Saturday, on WITA, on WNQM, the fact of the matter is it's an entertaining show that people listen to. And you can put it on any radio station that is functional and works. And if the content is good, people are going to find it and listen to it.
I agree with that. As a matter of fact, he had just sent a Twitter out today. He likes to go in and test new fast food sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
Today he's testing the Burger King, Wendy's, to see if it's any good or not.
Wendy's today, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it's the double stack. I think he's doing today. He does a lot of
I
things.
have to look for that. I know that his review's very popular, and he's got a dry personality and picks up on some of the most subtle of details. And I find him very entertaining, and he is extremely transparent when it comes to who's listening and helping the station as far as coverage and he's just a true shortwave fan, and he's a hard worker, Doc. He does this show, he does his reviews on YouTube, and he stays busy. So he's excellent to have on.
He's the face of countless memes, too, scattered all across the internet.
Yes, he is.
He's amazing.
I'm glad
to hear that ITA, and I already got a response, too.
Yes, immediately. So I just wanted to say, keep supporting the broadcasters on our medium wave, on WWCR. Let those folks hear from you. That's the only way that they know that you're listening. And, Doc, like you know, you've been a shortwave listener for a long, long time. It's just so easy to be in your house, in your office, whatever it is you're doing. You've got the radio on, you're listening. There are programs you've listened to for a long, long time, but never maybe communicated with the speaker. And it's very, very important that you do that. And I'll mention, just beyond that, it's still possible if you want to make a general donation to WWCR to keep the content diverse and to keep us on air. It's always possible to visit WWCR.com and click that donate button at the top.
Yeah,
and, you know, any amount works. We're grateful for every donation, right?
It works very easily, and it's very safe, too. You know, there's no reason to have any fear, you know, with all the things you hear about the Internet. This PayPal deal is very safe. They've never been hacked. Nobody gets your information. It's you can feel comfortable that it's okay to do it.
I ordered something using PayPal from India just last night.
Well,
I feel that safe.
I've done it several times, too, for overseas, and I've never had any trouble with it. So if any of our listeners might have a little bit of fear or a little concern about, you know, doing this on the Internet, it's as safe as it gets. I have no troubles doing it. And you don't either. You know, we've done it repeatedly.
So, Doc, in the very limited time that we have left, and it is very limited, I wanted to touch on this because we're going to be back in a couple of weeks. Thoughts on March Madness. And for those outside of the U.S. or outside of North America and people who just don't care much about it, Doc, what is March Madness?
Well, we missed it last year because of the pandemic, but it's the annual time of the year where all the 352 United States universities go in, narrow it down to 64, and they have playoffs to see who's going to be crowned
in basketball. So the total number again is what?
352.
352. We narrow it down now to 68, where it used to be 64.
Right.
And I asked you kind of to talk about it, but I want to mention there that of all those universities, Doc, there are several ways to get in. You can be a perennial powerhouse team with big money, or you can be Morehead State from the OVC in Kentucky, who won your own conference tournament and make it into this tournament. And it's a true one-and-done tournament where small schools have the opportunity to have a big stage.
Yeah, that's happened at least twice with Oral Roberts University.
Mm-hmm.
And that's familiar to many of our listeners. A little small university that has mapped out to the big crowds.
You mentioned Oral Roberts. They're still in there with a 15 seed, Loyola, a number 8 seed. We've got a Creighton at 5. This is down to 16, right, as we're recording this. USC is a 6. Oregon is a 7. Michigan is a 1. Alabama is a 2. UCLA 11. So of all these teams that they put in the mix, it's not just the number ones, but we do have a couple of those in there. One is Gonzaga and one is Baylor.
Right there. Now, they were number ones going into the March Madness.
Number one going in and still there. So the odds said that they're likely to win it all. There's 4 number 1 seeds. And again,
52 to 68 to 16.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't have it last year, and that really upset a lot of people in the United States. Not to mention that the betting lines in Las Vegas lost over $3 billion because there wasn't one.
I've never bet on sports. I don't particularly like it, but I know people do it. But it is an exciting tournament, Doc.
Oh, yeah.
We are out of time, but let's both give our prediction. We may be back to, eat crow or to say, hey, we got one right. But I think you and I both are picking Gonzaga to win it all.
And we're both, I believe, picking Gonzaga to beat Baylor.
That's a fact.
And we didn't put our heads together on it. We just did it separately, and we still come out with the same 2.
Right.
So we'll either eat crow next time or we'll tell everybody with confidence we already knew what we were doing.
Sounds good. We'll talk again in a couple of weeks, Doc.
Ask WWCR is a bi-weekly presentation of WWCR Incorporated. If there are questions you would like to have answered during the show, send them to Ask WWCR, 1300 WWCR Avenue, Nashville, Tennessee, 37218, USA. You can also send an email to askwwcr at wwcr.com. No email attachments, please. That's askwwcr at wwcr.com. WWCR.com. Be listening for your questions to be answered on future editions of Ask WWCR. There's a threat targeting America. One that's growing fast, but may still be hard to see. Lyme disease. Spread by tiny ticks, often smaller than the head of a pin. This dangerous disease is now more widespread than West Nile, tuberculosis, and HIV/AIDS combined. And if left untreated, it can lead to arthritis, facial paralysis, and even memory and concentration problems, often called brain fog. As the threat of Lyme disease grows to more than 300,000 projected cases each year, it's time for us to target Lyme disease. That means checking for ticks when you've been outside, even in your own backyard. It means seeing a doctor if you experience the symptoms of Lyme disease, which can include joint pain, flu-like symptoms, fever, fatigue, or sometimes a bullseye-shaped rash. Set your sights on stopping Lyme. Learn how you can target Lyme disease at targetlyme.org.
Welcome to another edition of the Australian DX Report. This is Bob Pudgever in Melbourne, Australia, bringing to you our latest roundup of news concerning shortwave broadcasting stations around the world. We include information concerning propagation reports, monitoring information, solar activity news, schedule information, and other items of interest to shortwave monitoring enthusiasts. A reminder that all times we give in these programs are in UTC, also known as GMT, and all frequencies are in kHz. Information from the Ionospheric Prediction Service in Sydney, New South Wales, here in Australia, advises that solar activity continues to be assessed at a very low level. The 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux has fallen to 78, and the daily equivalent smooth sunspot number has dropped to 17.7. The IPS also reports that those figures are not expected to change significantly in the immediate future. So it means that during the current year of the present solar cycle number 24, high frequency propagation on long distance paths on darkness or semi-darkness circuits on frequencies above about 10 megahertz will continue to be unreliable. However, frequencies below 10 megahertz for darkness circuits will be somewhat more satisfactory. First of all, some shortwave station news. Digital Radio Mundial transmission mode frequencies for Radio France International 24 hours, that's midnight to midnight, on 3965, non-directional to Western Europe in French. That's very low power. On 21620, 0830 to 0900 to Southern Asia in French. That's 150 kilowatts and 105 degrees antenna. Also 1130 to 1200, same frequency, 21620, same target area, Southern Asia in French, and same transmitter power and antenna. And 1330 to 1400, 21620, Southern Asia in French, 150 kilowatts and antenna 105 degrees. And 1530 to 1600 on 15310, again to Southern Asia in French, 150 kilowatts, 105 degrees. And 1730 to 1800, 11630, Southern Asia in French, 2130 to 2200 on 9580, again French to Southern Asia, and 2330 to midnight on 9885, also to Southern Asia in French. And that's an updated schedule for the DRM frequencies of Radio France International, with all transmissions from the Issoudun, France transmitting station. Now, some information about Radio New Zealand International, RNZ Pacific. It's made some changes to its schedule, and these are the new frequencies. 1959 to 2258, using 13840 English, 50 kilowatts, 035 degrees antenna. 2259 to 0358 on 15720, again English. 0359 to 0658 on 13730, English. 0659 to 0758 on 11725. 0759 to 0958 on 9700. 0959 to 1258 on 9700. 1259 to 1858 on 6115. 1651 to 1735 on 5975. English to Tonga and Samoa, that's in the DRM mode. And 1736 to 1835 on 9780, also to Tonga, Samoa, in DRM mode. And 1836 to 1958, 11690, again to Tonga, Samoa, DRM mode. 1859 to 1958 on 11725, that's in the AM mode. That's all Asia, all Pacific service in English. So those are some details of the new frequencies and current frequencies for Radio New Zealand International. We note the continuation of DRM services for several transmissions. Now we turn to China. China National Radio, a station known as the Voice of the Greater Bay Area, CNR7 is the designation. It started test transmissions on short wave, and the current schedule is as follows. 2055 to 0100 on 9570 to Eastern Asia in Chinese. The transmitting power there is 450 kilowatts, antenna 106 degrees. And 0100 to 1805 on 13810,
to East Asia in Chinese, again with 450 kilowatts, antenna 106 degrees. And finally 1200 to 1400 on 13810 again to Near Middle East in Chinese, and transmitter power there was 100 kilowatts, and then 239 degrees. And those transmissions are from the Kashi transmitting site in China. And reception in Eastern Europe of those frequencies suggests that 13810 has been heard quite strongly, and 0605 to 0855 noted at various times. Now to India. Test transmissions of All India Radio have been noted recently by European monitors. Current frequency and schedule is as follows. All on 5900 and 0530 to 0800 in Hindi to Southern Asia with the Vividi Bharati service, that's the national service, and 1030 to 1200, the same frequency, 5900 in Hindi to Southern Asia, same transmission mode, and 100 kilowatts, and test transmissions are presently in the AM mode. In future they may be in digital radio mondial, digital road. And something a little different this time. From the World Radio TV Handbook Facebook page, we note the following reception in the Middle East of these stations recently. These are all heard at 0450. 11825, World Christian Broadcasting station, with a program known as African Pathways in English. 11860, Radio Yemen, the relay from Saudi Arabia, broadcasting in Arabic. And 17530, World Christian Broadcasting, with the program in Chinese known as The Light of Light. It looks like good reception in the Middle East there, of various stations during the Middle Eastern daytime period. That's all the information in our program this time. We hope you found the podcast interesting and helpful for your shortwave radio monitoring.
know that we're asking Americans to do a lot right now. So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible to this virus.
A question I often get asked is, why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
Social distancing is really physical separation of people.
It's what we refer to when we ask people to stay at least 6 feet apart.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants, not going to theaters where there are a lot of people. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others who might actually be infected or infect you.
We all have a role to play in preventing person-to-person spread of this disease, which can be deadly for vulnerable groups. For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Hello and welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written in Indianapolis by Adrian Peterson and produced in the studios of WRMI Shortwave in Okeechobee, Florida. I'm Jeff White. This is edition NWS 632 for release on Sunday, April 4th, 2021. On Wavescan today, the radio scene in Brazil, the early wireless years, Radio Ematok Part 2, and our Japan DX report. Wireless experimentation began very early in Brazil, and in some ways it paralleled or perhaps even preceded the work that the famous young Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi was performing. In fact, the inventive Catholic priest Roberto Landel de Moura is sometimes designated as the Brazilian Marconi. Here's Ray Robinson now with the radio scene in Brazil, the early wireless years.
Thanks, Jeff. It was in the year 1893, 2 years before Marconi, that Roberto Landel began experimenting with the manufacture and assembly of very early wireless equipment during his ecclesiastical appointment in Porto Alegre in southern Brazil. His experiments continued during the following year, 1894 also, during which he activated his electrical equipment. And then during the year 1896, he privately conducted distance trials of his equipment in public areas, now in Sao Paulo itself. In June 1899, Landel succeeded in transmitting a wireless signal over a distance of more than 4 miles, but he was still not ready for a fully public demonstration. Roberto Landel's first fully public demonstration took place at Alto de Santana in Sao Paulo on June the 3rd of the following year, 1900. Among the invited observers were newspaper reporters, local officials, and the British Consul General, Mr. C.P. Lupton, together with his wife and family. This historic first public demonstration of wireless in South America over a distance of 5 miles was indeed a remarkable success, though the transmission of the human voice was very distorted with only a few words understandable. During the following year, 1901, Landel was issued a patent from the Patent Office in the United States for his development of what was called the radiographone. However, parallel with Landel's pioneer wireless development in Brazil, similar developments were taking place in England, Germany, the United States, and also in other areas of Brazil. During the year 1902, engineer Joaquim Gonçalves de Lalor applied to the state governors in Pará and Amazonas in Brazil on behalf of an American, Mr. R. Maddock, for approval to install wireless stations along tributary rivers associated with the mighty Amazon River. The usage of the local telegraph wire system in that area was very unreliable. 2 years later, in 1904, government approval was finally granted, and the concession was transferred to an American company, the Amazon Wireless Telegraph and Telephone Company. During the following year, 1905, 2 wireless stations were erected, one at Pinaira 11 miles from Belém, and the other at Breves, 80 miles further distant. Commercially made wireless equipment using the Fessenden system was imported from the United States. However, the performance of this Fessenden wireless equipment was inadequate, and the Breves and Belém stations were closed during the following year, 1906. As replacements, the Amazon Wireless Telegraph and Telephone Company in Brazil imported Shoemaker and Stone wireless equipment from the United States, which was installed at Belém and at an additional new location, Santarém. 5 years later again, now in 1911, 3 new stations were installed in the same Amazonas areas, this time with equipment from the German Telefunken Company. During that same year, the national government in Brazil gave approval for the same Amazon Wireless Telegraph and Telephone Company to erect wireless stations now throughout all of Brazil. However, at the same time as the Amazon Wireless Telegraph and Telephone Company was growing and expanding throughout Brazil, the Brazilian Telegraph Administration was also experimenting with the development of wireless, and they were also installing their own stations in various areas throughout their country. Back in 1904, the Brazilian Telegraph Administration had established 2 experimental wireless stations, one at Santa Cruz Fortress on the waterfront near Rio de Janeiro, and the other at Grande Island, 68 miles distant. The experiments at these 2 locations were continued for a period of 5 years. And then in 1909, the Brazilian Telegraph Administration began the construction of a whole series of wireless stations at many locations throughout Brazil. The first station in this sequence was installed at Babylonian Hill, near the waterfront in Rio de Janeiro. At the beginning of World War I in Europe, in 1914, there were a dozen coastal stations in Brazil and a score of inland stations. Back during this era, the call signs for the wireless stations in Brazil, both on land and on ships at sea, were simply a 3-letter abbreviation of the station name. Next month, we'll take a look at the early medium wave scene in the 3rd part of this, our series on the development of radio in Brazil. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Ray. Ray Robinson at KVOH in Los Angeles, California. Last week on Wavescan, we had part 1 of a presentation by Jim Salmon, producer of the program Radio Emma Talk World Service, which originates from the United Kingdom and airs on shortwave stations in Europe and the United States. We continue now with Jim Salmon's presentation at the recent European DX Council Zoom meeting.
So on to my journey into broadcasting. Well, back in the 1990s, I used to know a chap who was running a shortwave transmitter. Probably best not to say too much about all that, but it did result in me coming out with a program called Optimod, the monthly media magazine, and that used to go out every month for about 2 years on a transmitter on shortwave in the 48-meter band, and really enjoyed doing that. Loosely based on a station called Radio Fax that was transmitting before this, an information station, and well, it was an enjoyable project to do. I got a lot of letters in from a lot of reception reports in from across Europe. Still have a box up on my shelf here of reception reports and cassette tapes that people send in to me. One of the differences between then and now, obviously, was the fact that people used to write letters to us and send cassette tapes. Nowadays, obviously, it's email and it's MP3 files attached to an email. But there was still the enthusiasm for shortwave. That's still present today. One thing that hasn't changed since those days is an excellent magazine that I get every month, which will make a few of you smile, the British DX Communication magazine. And I was a member of the British DX Club back in 1993. I think my membership number is 1214, which always annoyed me a little bit because I wanted to be 1215 because that's the radio frequency. And again, I'm sure a lot of you will understand what I'm saying there. You'll probably also be able to guess a lot of my passwords because they're all radio frequencies. So communication back in the day, 1993, and at that time, I used to always be interested to know whether I would be listed in it. And I don't know whether you can make this out, but somewhere down here on 6238 kHz, there is Optimod is listed, along with the Belgian International Relay Service and Radio Merlin. So connections between all of those. That's Communication Now. That's the latest edition. The difference now, I'm still listed in Communication Now. The difference now is I've moved from the alternative airwaves section to the legitimate sections. So bit of a change there. But it's a brilliant magazine. I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted here. I'm sure you all actually receive this magazine. So a good chance for me to say thank you to everyone involved in producing that, because I still enjoy reading it every month. My wife still can't understand how I can sit and read 4, 5, 6 pages of numbers. But I say, well, it's interesting to me. But I don't think I'm ever going to persuade her that. Okay. So leading on from the 1990s, I then dabbled in community radio. A lot of people in the UK in the early 2000s were getting interested in community radio because the licensing laws opened up. So people were now allowed to get a short-term license. And we operated 4 times as a local station here in Chelmsford under what they call restricted service licenses. And I then actually did obtain a full-time community radio licence. But that's a whole other story, and I won't go into that now. But I was very successful in obtaining a licence and totally unsuccessful in realising that it's a 7 days a week job running a radio station. So that station didn't last very long. After a few years later into the 2010s, I started getting interested in the fact that shortwave was changing. And whilst a lot of the bigger stations were coming off of shortwave, there were relay stations that had already existed, but there were new relay stations coming up as well, which was very interesting to me because it gave people like me, as effectively I'm just a hobbyist or an enthusiast, it gave people like me the opportunity to actually get our programs put out on substantial transmitters. And that hadn't been possible before. A lot of the pirate transmitters that had been running in the 90s were probably in the order of 50 watts or 100 watts if they were lucky. But suddenly there were relay stations supplying airtime on 10 kilowatt transmitters, 100 kilowatt transmitters. And so that became more interesting. And I thought, well, let's give this a go. And using the name Chelmsford Calling, firmly tongue-in-cheek, I said, well, let's call it the World Service. Why not? And so I produced a program and approached the relay stations. And that was put out on stations in Germany, Finland, America, and we'll come on to relay stations a bit later. But it was a lovely project to do, and I never intended it to go on for very long, but did that for over a year, and again got lovely responses from people, and it introduced me to shortwave broadcasting again, and a much further reach with some of the larger relay stations. As always in life, things go on and other things happen, and there's not always time. So I think this was back in 2015 I did this. So stopped after a year, but at the time I was a radio ham. My call sign is 2E0RMI, and as a member of the local radio club, we've often transmitted from a strange hut in our industrial museum. It's in our Sandford Mill Industrial Museum, and nearly 100 years ago, this hut was here. It was in a field in Writtle on the outskirts of Chelmsford, and it was owned by the Marconi Company. And it was actually the place where the first regular entertainment broadcast station started in the UK. Wasn't the first radio station, wasn't the first station to play entertainment programs, but it's really quite a pivotal moment in radio history, because it was the first time that a regular program was put out every Tuesday evening. There was an amazing bunch of people who were running this radio station. Just in this one picture alone, there are 3 people who went on to become the first 3 chief engineers of the BBC. So this is back in 1922. February 1922, this radio station started. And because it was the first of its kind in the UK, as a regular station, it had a fantastic following. So I became very interested in the story of 2MT. The station was called 2MT. Became very interested in the story. this, a chap called Tim Wander, who's written books on the station, and we thought, well, let's do a celebration broadcast. So in 2017, when the station was 95 years old, or would have been 95, we operated a 3-day internet radio station, something new for me, not transmitting, but actually relaying programs via the internet. And we were actually able to do some of the programs from the actual hut itself. So this is a picture, February 2017, where we called the radio station Radio Amatok, and we transmitted, or we relayed programs. We didn't actually transmit it because we were on the internet. We relayed programs from the hut itself. In the picture behind me is a replica of the original transmitter that was built back in 1922. Excellent, good response again. People seemed interested in the story of 2MT. Most of the programs some programs came from the hut, some came from a little room in the roof of my house, which is my own home studio, and it was an enjoyable experience. Once again, those very good people from the British DX Club included me on the back page of their magazine, so I'm very, very pleased for that. And it was an enjoyable experience. Some people ask why my project is called Radio Amatok. Basically, the station that inspired me, 2MT, from nearly 100 years ago, 2MT had to announce their call sign at regular intervals, and the phonetic alphabet they used in those days was different to what we use now. So M then was Emma, and T was Top. So they used to say this is 2 Amatok calling, 2 Amatok. So I thought, that's a nice name, a nice quirky little name, so hence Radio Amatok. So fast forward a couple of years, the project still carries on, celebrating 2MT. We have some ideas about doing something next year, which will be the centenary of 2MT. But we didn't really think we'd do much between the 95th anniversary and the centenary next year. But then, as we all know, beginning of last year, this horrible thing happened and lockdown came and affected us all. And suddenly I was left with a lot of time on my hands. And I started tuning around shortwave bands again and thought, well, I've got time to start producing a program again. So we thought, well, let's see if we can do a short program called the Radio Amatok World Service and raise awareness of 2MT, but also try and create a program probably in the old style of shortwave programs, which are friendly, promote friendship between listeners, and just make a fun program that goes out on shortwave. The initial intention, I approached the relay stations again and got a very good response. So we started, I think it was back in May, our first program with the Radio Amatok World Service, a small 30-minute program. So just to start to tell you how I make the program, very basic, very simple. I record the links using a very old microphone, still using a mix that I've been using for 20 years, and that then feeds into, if you look at the centre of the picture there, a small handheld recorder, a Tascam recorder. Actually, I don't need the microphone or the mixer. I could do all of this with the small handheld recorder, but the microphone and the mixer give me a chance to slightly tweak the quality of the audio. So the vocals are all recorded on the recorder there. Then I come downstairs and to my radio room downstairs and put the whole program together on a very good program called Audacity, which means I can crossfade and join music and vocals and recordings together. This shows the opening of the program, then the vocals come in. So a very, very useful program to be able to put things together. I guess back in the day, I would have had to do it all live and record it as a full 30-minute program. But it tends to be easier now using this type of technology.
You were listening to Jim Salmon, producer of the DX program Radio Amatok World Service. We'll have more of Jim's talk on an upcoming edition of Wavescan. But now it's over to Tokyo. Here's Yukiko Tsuji.
Hello and welcome to the DX Report of the Month from Japan Shortwave Club, edited by Toshi Otake, and I'm Yukiko Tsuji. We have several DX reports from our club members this week. Radio Filipinas from Philippines was heard on 9475 kHz on March 11th, from 0219 to 0231 UTC in English. SIO rating was 252. Dateline Malacanang was on the air. ID was given at 0227. Radio New Zealand Pacific was heard on 15720 kHz on February 28th from 0520 to the sign-off at 0558 UTC in English and Maori. SIO rating was 453. Talk program with pop music was broadcast. ID was given at 0558. The frequency was changed to 13730 kHz at 0600. BBC via Singapore was received on 5845 kHz on March 3rd from 2158 with interval signal to 2300 UTC in English. SIO rating was 353. The programs heard were World News at 2200, followed by Newsroom at 2206, News at 2230, and the World Business Report at 2232. VOA Radio Ashna via Udon Thani, Thailand, was heard on 12075 kHz on March 10th from the sign-on at 1500 to 1535 UTC in Dari. SIO rating was 252. Talk program with local song was aired. Al Azam Radio via Saudi Arabia was heard on 11745 kHz on March 5th from 1600 to 1630 UTC in Arabic. SIO rating was 252. Talk program was on the air. This was the clandestine station to Yemen. CDNK via Tashkent, Uzbekistan was received on 7580 kHz on March 11th from the sign-on at 1400 to the sign-off at 1430 UTC in Korean. SIO rating was 453. ID and the talk program with Korean music were broadcast. ID as CDNK Bansamnimnida was given at 1429. CDNK stands for Committee for Democratization of North Korea. This new clandestine station to North Korea started on March 2nd this year and broadcast on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday every week. TWR India via Grigoriopol, Moldova was heard on 7590 kHz on March 9th from 1545 to the sign-off at 1600 UTC in Kazakh. SIO rating was 353. Talk program with local music was broadcast. ID was given at 1559. Voice of Hope, Africa from Lusaka, Zambia, was heard on 6065 kHz on March 8th from 2044 to 2055 UTC in English. SIO rating was 252. Talk program by a male announcer and the pop music program were on the air. ID was given at 2050. China National Radio interfered on the same frequency at 2055. Radio Tarma from Peru was heard on 4775 kHz on March 4th from 1013 to 1036 UTC in Spanish. SIO rating was 242. Local pop music was played. ID was given at 1021 and 1035. Finally, Japan Shortwave Club will issue the QSL cards for the correct reports on our segment of Wavescan program. We are issuing QSL cards by email to the report sent by email. Our address for your email report is jswcqsl@live.jp. I repeat, jswcqsl@live.jp. We continue to issue the printed QSL card by the same system as before. Your report should be addressed to JSWC PO Box 44, Kamakura, which is KAMAKURA, postal code 248-8 8691 Japan. One ILC or $2 for return postage will be appreciated. For this edition of DX Report, we'd like to thank Mr. Yoshiaki Hayashi, Mr. Iwao Nagatani, Mr. Tetsuya Toriumi, and Mr. Chiaki Shimada for sharing the information with us. Thank you for listening, and please join us for our next edition of DX Report of Japan Shortwave Club. I'm Yukiko Tsuji in Tokyo.
Thank you, Yukiko. And finally, a reception report, as I mentioned, that has been sent to Wavescan for 9510 kHz. It's a signal of 55334 strong signal, and that was in Geneva, Switzerland. This reception report from Enrique Fernandez. And he says, I could listen to Wavescan with the new 821 frequency allocation DX report from the Philippines. And after Wavescan, I could hear a music program by IWRS in Milan. This particular transmission of Wavescan was via IWRS, Italian Radio Relay Service in Milan. And Enrique was using a Texan PL365 handheld portable with a built-in telescopic antenna. He says, I really enjoyed listening to your broadcasts, this time from a park on the shores of Lake Geneva. I said hi to Jeff White. I saw him online during the last virtual EDXC meeting a week ago. All right. Thanks, Enrique. It was good to see a number of fellow shortwave listeners on the EDXC Zoom meeting. Well, spring in Japan means cherry blossoms, and this is a song called Cherry Blossoms, Japanese music, ending today's edition of Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio, researched and written in Indianapolis by Dr. Adrian Peterson. Next week on Wavescan, Moon Bounce Radio, Part 3. We'll have more about the advantages of shortwave for international broadcasting. And our Philippine DX report is coming up as well. Several QSL cards are available for Wavescan. Send your AWR and KSDA reception reports to the AWR address in Thailand. Stay tuned for that. And also to the station that your radio is tuned to, WRMI or WWCR or KVOH or Voice of Hope Africa, or to IWRS Italy, or the AWR relay stations that carry Wavescan. Remember, too, you can send a reception report to the DX reporters when their segment is on the air here in the program, such as today's report from Japan. They will also verify with their own colorful QSL card. Return postage and an address label are always appreciated. The only email address for AWR QSLs is qsl@awr.org. The postal address for AWR QSLs is Adventist World Radio, P.O. Box 234, Prakanong, that's Prakanong, Bangkok 10110, Thailand. Again, Adventist World Radio, P.O. Box 234, Prakanong, Bangkok 10110, Thailand. And the email address for other correspondence to Wavescan is wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Okeechobee, Florida, in the United States. Till next week, good listening, everyone.